KingofPodcasts.com proudly presents The Wrestling is Real Podcast, because wrestling needs us. Yours truly, King of Podcasts, here with you for another Wrestling is Real Podcast, episode 578. We are recapping NXT TakeOver WarGames, which really, if I want to go and talk about the actual show, it was good. Don't get me wrong. But it really does give me a time to go ahead and talk more about a lot of things when it comes to NXT and what we get as the best when it comes to takeovers. This is what I need to do. I can't just break down takeovers just like I would normally do and just break down how well the matches are. It's because there's a bigger, wider subject that we talked about when it comes to NXT. And that subject is this developmental territory, this system, is it really just acting more as an indie brand to take away the attention from all the other independents? Your AEWs, MLWs, NWAs, Impact Wrestlings, New Japan, whatever. Is that what it's really doing? Or is it really still serving as a developmental territory, as developmental talent, which is going to make their way up to the NXT roster? Or excuse me, the main roster, excuse me. I don't feel that's the case at all. There are a lot of weaknesses right now, and I think what I suspect were some consequences for the Wednesday Night War that NXT was going to go through as a result of going head-to-head with AEW. I'm going to say it right now. I think my concerns are validated as of tonight. One of the reasons I think this is the case is because NXT, when I look at what probably Vince McMahon, Triple H, and the others are thinking about when it comes to this product, when it got to the USA Network, the show cannot have developmental talent that might be a little bit green and might not be ready for prime time, that might struggle a little bit as younger talent. When we watched the NXT show on the WWE Network, or even before it was that, when we couldn't even watch it on the network yet because we had to watch it and it went overseas and I had to go watch the show on like a different channel and all, right? So we had the times where NXT wasn't easily accessible. And the show was really meant to be developmental. You had a lot of young stars. We would see who would make the cut. This is where we saw the Adam Roses and the No Way Jose's and the Tyler Breezes, right? Remember, this is the kind of stuff we had. And in the middle of this, we also had the Shield, we had the Wyatt family, and we had so many other things that were going on, which did lead to the further development of stars that will make it to the main roster eventually. And we're seeing some of that now. But again, we're seeing a repetition of the same types of gimmicks and characters from certain stars that just get brought up. Because there really isn't much difference from one to the other. Maybe in terms of style, maybe in terms of, looks, a little bit, but really there's not much. NXT is positioned like it's a rock show, when rock has not been relevant for over a decade. Listen, we know if you're talking about the audience that is a younger audience, which NXT does not attract. We've talked about that. AEW attracts a younger audience every week. Almost every week since they started the Wednesday Night War. So they've been going after a younger audience. And you can just tell with some of the stars they have, it's different. And then when you look at what NXT does, it is a taste of ECW, Ring of Honor, Evolve, CZW. It's just all these other indie formations that have a lot of dark, dreary, moody characters, and then some veterans that are just really strong. Listen, when you look at what NXT is, I mean, you have a number of indie darlings, or you have a lot of stars that are actually, they're good enough They would be really good and possibly top stars in most other organizations outside of WWE. Okay, the Undisputed Era, obviously, you put them back in Ring of Honor, they would be superstars again. All 4 of them. If you put them in Impact Wrestling, they would be positioned very well. They would actually be probably at the level of, say, the Eddie Edwards or the Sami Callahans or whatnot, and you get some great matches with all of them. If you put them in MLW, that would be amazing. If you put them in NWA, that would be a coup. But again, these guys are getting paid, and they're getting to run this show on television. It's like the Click. But the deal is that they're here. They're getting to go ahead and have their time on camera doing the NXT show. It's their show. They don't have to move up. They're not even going to be positioned to be moved up, at least as far as I'm concerned. I don't see them being pushed up into the main roster, the Undisputed Era. I don't think that's going to be happening at all. That's something to be said about that. You have to consider that. They're being held there because they can't be let go to some other organization. So you keep them contractually obligated to there. I'll never understand why Timothy Thatcher got signed. I'll never understand why Dexter Lumis or Cameron Grimes got signed. Okay. Timothy Thatcher, he is good. Yeah, he's good. Good, tough guy, right? When I look at Dexter Lumis, I don't understand why they signed him when the only time I really felt the relevance of that character was when he was stalking Christy Hemme. That's when I cared about him. That's when I thought it was interesting. Other than that, no, not at all. Otherwise, what else is there to the group? Okay, you signed Damian Priest because he probably would have been a bigger name. He probably would have grown much more in Ring of Honor. But again, the deal to get him out of there, it's not much to go and pay him to get him away. Got that. Tommaso Ciampa, same thing. And yet, that guy could go up to the main roster, but he doesn't want to. That's smart. But I'm sure Tommaso Ciampa could go to other organizations, but they've done a pretty good job of building him up. He's a mainstay on NXT, but they're not going to move him up. Finn Balor is a mainstay of NXT now because he doesn't want to work the main roster now. He wants to go back where he can feel comfortable, where he can work, hone his craft, and you know what? They're paying him well. So he's basically like, Finn Balor's like, oh, I don't need to go back up to the main roster. You know what? Just let me go, enjoy my friends over here in NXT. I'll do this. I like being over here. And keep paying me what you're paying me because I don't need to make more than, I don't need to go make, beans going back out to Japan or Europe and having to really scruff it again. Got it. Got that part. And this is the men I'm talking about. Because when I look at what the men's part of the roster that was focused on tonight, so you've had Dexter Lumis, Cameron Grimes in a feud for a while. Got it. I don't see where the Velveteen Dream becomes anything significant at some point. It's a nice little story with Leon Ruff. But again, when you look at what we have, Damian Priest is kind of an offshoot of Aleister Black. And Aleister Black has been a non-factor. And I don't know if he's going to be any factor now after Zelina Vega was let go because of the relationship. It's where Lana is the same case with Rusev going away. What I do see is the positive side on the NXT side is they do have a bunch of stars that will make it well on the women's side. There's a lot of positivity on the women's side. And this is what comes on overall. Now, let me put it to you like this. There are 4 main stars right now on the main roster of WWE, right? I'm not talking about tag teams. We're not going to talk about the, what level of the card they're going to be at, but the main eventers we're going to talk about. You really need to ask yourself the question. Of the stars that you saw tonight, or the stars that you see regularly on NXT, which are the ones that have the real upside? And listen, maybe there's a difference when they have a crowd along there to go ahead and follow along to really build up stars. When they don't have that, I don't think that makes much of a difference now. But my point is this. right now, the current stars that are main roster, bankable, marketable stars right now. You have Roman Reigns, Drew McIntyre, you have Sasha Banks, and Asuka. Of the people that you saw on this roster tonight, how many of them live up to the level or have the potential to be at the level of those 4 stars right there? Because that's where all these stars in NXT need to strive to be. They need to be at the championship level. And these are the 4 right now that are at their prime that could be considered to be at the level that these stars are supposed to be. Okay. I argue it's going to be easier to make that argument for the stars on the NXT side. And I absolutely think of the stars that you see right now, I'm going to say there's probably 4 stars that really stand out to me that I think are going to be stars to look at that are going to make their way to the main roster. They will make that turnover, and they will be called up. In no particular order, by the way, I'm going to say Dakota Kai, Toni Storm, Rhea Ripley, and Io Shirai. Those 4 can go at any time called up to the main roster. You could do that as early as next year after WrestleMania or whenever you want. I think those 4 absolutely have something there to be moved up. And you could base it off of some of the stars you already have that have come to the NXT ranks, which is kind of why you see certain stars make it through, because there are the same kind of roles that get brought in, right? So Dakota Kai gives me the heel Bayley kind of feel to her. And she's kind of the Bayley of that newest crop. Toni Storm, I really can't think of where she fits in. She's just a different altogether. And there's just something about her that she will appeal to the main roster. There's just a look to her and her style and all of that that really will stand out for her. Ember Moon was there. And I think coming back to the NXT roster works for her. I don't see where she makes much of a difference on the main roster. She gets lost in the translation. Rhea Ripley absolutely has a look, something there. She kind of gives me what a Charlotte Flair does or what a Becky Lynch gives. I think she gives that kind of aura. So you could see Rhea Ripley absolutely make it up to the main roster. We already saw her a short time do that, and she could be something special. And Io Shirai can absolutely give what Asuka gives. In the same kind of vein, those 4 are absolutely main event bound. Or excuse me, main roster bound. It could be main event bound. I don't know. I couldn't rule that out at all. Candice LeRae, I think she's just being held on in case of another roster decides to go and pick her up. The same way with Johnny Gargano. Johnny Gargano is being held here. They're paying him to keep him here so he does not go to another roster to thrive. Because I think there are just a number of stars. If you took them somewhere else, they would be something like that. In my case, I'll say it like this: Candice LeRae and Johnny Gargano make me feel like what Eddie Edwards and Alicia Edwards are. Is that a decent sort of comparison? That's what I look at. Tommaso Ciampa, like I said, you can put him somewhere else. As for some of the other stars, Raquel González or Shotzi Blackheart, listen, again, I think Shotzi Blackheart could be served better in another organization. Like, they are doing a bit to kind of build up what, as a character, she already has built up for a long time herself. Just saying. I don't have enough to say about Raquel González to really get into, because she's still pretty new to the mix. And then Pat McAfee being used as a conduit to give relevance to a couple of European stars that, while good workers, cannot cut promos. I mean, again, remember what we've seen done with some of these guys. So Danny Burch, Oney Lorcan, yeah, good workers in the ring, and so was I think of Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan in the same vein when I look at Shane Thorne and Nick Miller. But again, what else is there to be said about those stars that really stand out? There's not much. And then Pete Dunne, remember, the bruiserweight, sure, works well on the NXT UK. There's just a look to him. Sure, let's try to bring him over and see what he could do with him. I got it. But when it comes to Pete Dunne, there's just not much more than just the guy being just a strong, good, tough wrestler. Got it. Catch as catch can. A Steven Regal prodigy, right? Prospect. But again, you have to put a Pat McAfee in here, which, by the way, he gets some kind of clout from the sports radio circuit, from his ESPN run and the stuff in Fox and kind of moving around. I got it. He's a bit of a character. And he helps out. But it's not going to be enough to get these other three guys over. And as for, again, the Undisputed Era, Adam Cole is the mouthpiece. Adam Cole could absolutely move up to the main roster, and you can give him a shot. But what will he do that would be any different than Riddle or Keith Lee or others? I just don't know where Adam Cole fits into the mix, because Adam Cole would be lost in translation, because there are stars that they have on the main roster to kind of fit. I mean, AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan kind of fit that role. And it's not when Adam Cole came up to the main roster, got a chance to wrestle. He wasn't good. But again, I just don't think they have a place for him. They don't have something for him. And that's what goes on with the rest of the NXT roster. It's where I feel things are with this company. When I look at the roster right now of them overall, okay, if I need to look at the NXT roster right now that is there, okay, they didn't offer Finn Balor as the NXT champion. They didn't put him on the show. Got it. With him, it's like you want to talk about putting some star power on that show. So Finn Balor, honestly, his purpose on NXT is to give some star power to that program, which is what the original intention was. The problem is that NXT lost its purpose. It's a holding area. It's a holding ground for stars that would probably thrive anywhere else, with only a couple of select female wrestlers that I think would do very well moving to the main roster. Because for whatever reason it is, I think it's easier for the women to get over than it is the men. That's what it is to me. Because the women, they must be doing really well to learn their craft and quickly take on and adopt wrestling. And then they get on board and they go right up. And we see that there are just certain stars that come from NXT that just get a better run when they make up to the main roster. The men don't get that same option. Much more critical. And it's not critical in the sense of, maybe it's not, I don't know what's the best way to say it, but there's a critical element when it comes to the men making their way up to the main roster, because of the fact that, the women, there's just something that they offer more. And let's just be honest, it's the appeal. It is, the looks, their build, the appeal, the beauty, and, talking about women that can offer probably a lot more emotions and a lot more depth to their character in some cases. Believe it or not. So you look right now, and look at some of the stars that did not come on here that they have. They have a bunch of other stars that are on here that they could try to move up. But again, they're trying to figure it out. Austin Theory was in a little short stint in the Johnny Gargano match, right? But again, he's just kind of lost. And they put him into the setup with the Monday Night Messiah. That quickly went away. I don't know what happened there. Bronson Reed, they gave him a little something, and they've kind of just dropped him off. He's just not, I guess he's around. These are the names I'm just thinking about. Drake Maverick. Again, this is somebody that if Impact were able to get him back, or somebody else could get him, I think it could be better used. But again, Drake Maverick being brought in as a wrestler, and less as a managerial or a character that could be in a on-air speaking role doesn't make sense. Isaiah Swerve Scott. This is a guy who's being held here, getting paid, because if you go somewhere else, I think he would excel. Remember, this guy was an MLW champion. That means something, because there's not a lot of MLW champions in that organization's history. Joaquin Wilde, again, another guy. If you put him in another organization, I think he would excel. He could very well go back to Impact Wrestling, and I think he would do good. Or he could go to MLW or wherever he wants. I think he would do well. Karrion Kross is one of the guys that absolutely, I feel, does have upside. That's the one guy I feel like that more than anybody has so much opportunity to grow into the main roster because he is a different character. And I saw there was a little bit of a tease of him making his way back. Hopefully that means he's going to be making it back sometime at the first of the year, which he's sorely needed. You got Kushida on that roster. Now, he's had a lot of issues with injuries and all. But again, Kushida, he gets signed over here in the same kind of way as the Shinsuke Nakamura role. And I'm just saying to myself, again, there's just this pipeline that comes in from Japan. And why Kushida's here and where that guy could be served better anywhere else. But if it's for the paycheck, I can't knock all these stars for doing that. If WWE is going to be willing to pay the money to keep them here just to make sure nobody else gets them, then I can't knock them for that. And again, they're in NXT. They're not being jobbed out. They're not being destroyed. They're not being demeaned. In NXT, they're just being used as needed. And that's it. But they're not going to go any higher up the main roster. So why is the purpose of them having them here except for the fact they're worried about AEW? That's what it is. I keep looking down the line. You got Raul Mendoza. Well, again, you have the Scarface type factor with Santos Escobar, right? Sure. I mean, what they have of the roster right now. And there's other stars I see that can make their way up on the women's side that could definitely do really well as well. I must say, Mercedes Martinez, could see something with her. And again, there's a lot of stars that are here on the women's side that if you put them in somewhere else, you could see them on AEW Dark. You could see them on a Women of Honor, in a Women of Honor match. Or you could see them in, Impact Wrestling as a knockout. A lot of them. Santana Garrett, she's been everywhere, right? Casey Catanzaro has been a lot of places as well. Kaden Carter, right? And you just say to yourself, okay, what are we doing here? And again, no managers. You have managers in there. Robert Stone, not much of a factor right now at all. Malcolm Bivens, not much of a factor right now. And that's where we are. NXT needs a change. They need to go ahead and relegate themselves back. I think for the good of the company, in 2021, this is just my thought. And listen, this might be a completely different opinion of what everybody else thinks out there, and that's okay. All right, that's okay. I'm going to talk about the card very shortly. I'll talk about what I thought about that very briefly. But I'm just saying for the NXT card, for the NXT roster, that WWE right now needs to go ahead and start concerning themselves with the fact that they need to quit holding on to talent, just to hold on to talent to avoid the others. This is enough. It's a losing battle for them to keep doing this. They are sacrificing NXT right now for the sake of withholding talent from showcasing their talent somewhere else. Do they need to put so much money into the roster here? Why not get back to a developmental brand? I mean, you could absolutely have certain stars that you need to kind of keep the brand as it was. Before AEW came into the scene, you already had the Undisputed Era and other stars that were mainstays, that were, veterans, to work with the younger stars. We're not getting that now. We're not getting that at all. Look at how many people we have that are established stars. Because remember, you got a lot of younger stars that they keep bringing into the Performance Center on a regular basis. And what are they doing? Again, I don't understand what they're doing at all. They have stars. They're not going to bring up and build up the other ones. Again, I get it. The Kona Reeves of the world, you want to really bring them out there and do something. I'm not much of him either. Or Killian Dane, you've given him a little bit push up and down and whatnot. I get it. And then you have other stars that, I haven't heard about and I haven't talked about. Ashanti the Adonis or Arturo Ruas or, Boa or Chase Parker or Jake Atlas or Mansoor or Matt Martell or Ridge Holland. Listen, there's a lot of other stars that are coming into the ranks, but again, they're not going to be much of a factor. And are they going to really get any kind of spot? Because you've already solidified the spot with certain veterans that are up there. Like, what's the difference between giving Undisputed Era up there with Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa and others? Yeah, I understand they don't have the star power of the NWO and WCW back in the day with like Savage and Piper and Hogan and Flair and Sting and DDP and Hall and Nash, right? I got it. The older guard holding the rest down. A ceiling. Well, they're in the ceiling right now. And the ceiling is created because they're worried about AEW building their audience. Well, I'm sorry. WWE, you couldn't stop the inevitable. In the words of Dan Patrick when he used to be on SportsCenter on ESPN, you cannot control it. You can only hope to contain it. And that's where we are right now. The company is starting to build up. And they're already finding a couple things to help build them back up. Listen, that winter is coming thing, this Impact Evasion angle, this impossible invasion, if that's what it is, it's going to get a bit of buzz. And I think they could get 1 million viewers a week while getting the head-to-head. And thus spreading out their lead on NXT. Why WWE does not want to learn from their history, I don't understand. When we look at the ratings now, again, 913,000 viewers for Dynamite this past week. Now, we're not getting the 83 weeks right now, of course. Understood. 1 weeks. And we have a few more weeks left of the year, right? The second half of 2020. AEW has won 18 weeks of 21. And there's nothing right now that says they're going to be able to keep that, that they're going to keep losing that, they're going to lose any of that. Okay? At the moment, AEW has already won the last 13 weeks. And they can keep that streak up. At what point do you say NXT USA Network move to Tuesdays? Stop programming with AEW. This is the mistake that this company was going to make. I called it back then. I was right. And they did it. And they sacrificed what NXT was for the detriment of trying to hold off AEW from growing. Well, they failed. Now, has AEW been blowing up the charts with their ratings? No. Not necessarily. They're not getting like the biggest audience in the world. Again, they're just starting to kind of try to pull things where they can pull some audience together, and they're able to go ahead and if they can pull it together, they can try to pull maybe 1 million viewers. Again, with Sting, the Kenny Omega invasion angle, all this going on, they're going to build some momentum going into the next year. They're doing that right now. If that's the case, why keep fighting this war that you're losing? It's time for NXT to move over to Tuesday nights. And this would be good for everybody. Impact Wrestling, move it to Thursdays. Perfect. I'll take that all right there. Because I think for the good of the business, we need to have that. It doesn't make sense to keep doing this. And then NXT needs to go back to what it was Stop counter programming, trying to put all the veterans up here, the stars that you think are going to be solid players, and look like a solid, polished indie promotion, and bring this back to a developmental territory. Now, I understand this is not a YouTube show, and this is not on the WWE Network where you can allow a little bit of developmental to be on here. Yeah, USA probably expects the level of competition where when they used to have SmackDown Live, I bet you USA wants to have those kind of numbers for this NXT show because they are paying for it. I get that part, but I think you can go ahead and then start bringing in matches and stars, and you could do a little something to try to go ahead and work out something to get some new stars built up. The stars of tomorrow. Get back to that. Not these indie stars that you have right now that you are holding on to with contracts because you're afraid of AEW. Why are you afraid of? The fact that WWE is so worried about suppressing competition more than it is supporting their creative efforts, that's the biggest problem. There's no NXT is the pick the key, is the lock that you pick that explains everything else that they're doing wrong, the mistakes they make. NXT was doing very well. It's still a good show, but the purpose of that show is lost right now. It is lost because you used it to counter-program AEW. Because you were afraid this company, you think this company wasn't going to last. Well, guess what? Not only did they last, they extended their contract another 3 years. Okay? This show is staying around till 2024. Vince, Trips, Stephanie, you're not getting rid of this show. AEW is not going away. They are your competition now. And yes, if you move the show from Wednesday to Tuesday night, yes, an unopposed AEW Dynamite will probably get to 1 million viewers. Absolutely. Well, they're doing it now. With the adversity, they are doing it now. You put a live show head-to-head against them. Okay? The same way Eric Bischoff did the Monday Night Wars and putting Nitro, programming it direct up against Monday Night Raw. Forcing them to go live. Forcing them to change. You're using this. You're becoming Eric Bischoff's plan. Are you trying to make Eric Bischoff right? I'm reading the Nitro book. It's amazing how history kind of repeats itself. Are you trying to become Eric Bischoff and make the same mistakes? Just splurging on the talent on the NXT roster, it might not be that much. It's not the money that you put, that WCW was putting out there, grossly overpaying people on their roster on WCW. Right. That might be different, but it's not. The principle still stays the same. It's a good idea to go ahead and let these stars go ahead and thrive somewhere else. Unless you feel a need that they should still be good here and they can be used to build new talent. But that's what that show needs to be. If you have established stars that would do very well somewhere else, they need to go ahead and help the build. Either they need to go ahead and be one of two things. They're going to help the stars to build them up so they can make it to the main roster. Or they need to make it to the main roster. Okay, there should be only two reasons that some of these stars should be here. You're either trying to get to the main roster, this is a launch pad, or you're helping stars make it onto the launch pad and get up to the main roster. Because Undisputed Era, Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, what are you here for? If you're not going to be brought up to the main roster, Ciampa could have been brought up. He don't want to go. Finn Balor was up. He don't want to go back up. Undisputed Era, I don't know why they're not going up there, but I don't know if they would. Finn Balor, right? Think about it. If you're good just to go ahead and help develop new stars and help work with younger stars and get them up to where you are or get them better, okay, then that's the purpose you have. That's the reason for your contract. But if not, what are you there for? Except for a payday. I can't knock you if you're going to get a payday, but I think for the company's sake, this is where I put the corporate hat on. If I'm thinking as a corporate company, I'm thinking, man, we need to go ahead and we still need to continue to keep ourselves lean because we're still without live shows. We're not getting the kind of merch sales that we're getting before. Like there's a couple of things that are in our sectors of profit making. Some of the pipelines are getting a little dry. So if you don't have anything for some of the roster to do, then yeah, you start whittling the roster down. Why not the NXT roster? The ones that are getting paid somewhat. I mean, the other organizations are back up and running. It's not as if any of these wrestlers will go somewhere else. And it's like you're worried about them being able to become big stars somewhere else, where they're going to go and take over you. Why don't you worry about your own product? Main roster should worry about the main roster. And if you don't feel like stars from another organization, you're not going to get them to come into line and toe the company line and go WWE style. Because NXT, you're kind of allowed to kind of keep your style. Well, then you're not going to make it anywhere here. You know this, right? You understand this. So why do you expect to go and stay here when you know you're not made for that main roster? You know what the WCW stars went through. You know what the ECW stars went through here. Or if you come back as a retread into the company. Remember, you're going to have to go ahead and take your lumps. Especially if you're coming back. Or if you're coming in and you're from another organization and you were not built and created and bred from WWE. Because if you weren't, then you have that much more difficulty making it up to the main roster. Or main eventing, for that matter. Because if you weren't made by them, then you're left with like a scarlet letter on your chest. This is where I think some of these stars, and I'm not knocking the stars like the Tommaso Ciampas and the Johnny Garganos and the Undisputed Era. Absolutely not. I'm saying spread the talent go around, right? You're in the primes of your career. Become champions somewhere. Because you're going to be held to a ceiling here in this company. It's obvious. So why take that unless you just want the payday? If you feel like you just need the payday because it's going to help your family, okay, rock on. That's what it comes down to me. It's fascinating. And these are conundrums that this company has brought themselves to. And they did with NXT what I thought they would do. There we go. You asked for it. Okay, let me get to the show itself really quickly. So listen, the WarGames matches were very good. You know, a couple of extra hardcore stuff going on with tables and chairs and stuff that were not necessary. The men's WarGames match, the names on the tables. I'm sorry, Bully Ray did that before with Team 3D, right? Or didn't they do it with the Dudley Boys when the Dudleys came back, right? Yes. A triple threat match for the NXT North American Championship, that was fine. Dexter Lumis, Cameron Grimes, the storyline, I'm not into it at all. And I just feel like there's just... This is why I keep looking at what I'm looking at with these shows. And I'm saying to myself, man, I can't help but think about how this show's being used. How this portion of WWE is a brand. Why this brand is being used so wrong. It should be a developmental system once again. Let's get back to that. Take the risk. And by the way, take some stones and do it. Get USA Network to make the decision. Move the show to Tuesdays. Okay, you're already getting some traction right now on SmackDown, where you have solidified a couple of positions right now on the main roster. Even on Raw, you've kind of done that. Okay? So you have that working for you. Even with November having a couple of bad shows for Raw, the numbers have gone up a little bit better. And they're getting us somewhere a little bit with the Drew McIntyres and the Asukas and a couple of other things they're working on. Got it. They're still missing on things like the Hurt Business and Retribution and whatnot. But again, SmackDown's been hitting pretty good. Except for last week, which was Thanksgiving. They're consistently pulling over 2 million viewers again. That's pretty damn good. They're starting to get some traction here. You're starting to see their audience build back up on both shows. They're actually getting a little bit of traction. So while those shows are starting to make some traction, let's get some focus back on those, and let's get NXT back to a developmental territory. Move them to Tuesday nights. Stay in your lane. Don't worry about AEW. They're going to grow anyway. And the truth is, you should worry about the ramp of time before AEW might be able to catch up. If they're able to get to 1.5 million or 2 million viewers, right? Then I would be concerned. But until then, you have a year or so to continue to build off the momentum that you're getting right now. Because I see the momentum. It's happening right now. I'm actually giving you credit, WWE. I'm actually giving you credit right now. So that's what you got to do. I think those will be great moves for 2021. Anyway, coming up on the next show, Wednesday going to Thursday, I'll go ahead and get into part 3 of my year in review, where we focus on how all these wrestling companies became affected immediately as the pandemic happened. We'll get right into that, and we'll start working our way through and see what they did with WrestleMania, and with AEW making the way back, and what all these shows were able to do to kind of continue to trudge forward as the pandemic came upon us, and really create this ruckus year that has been 2020. We're going to talk about that on the next Wrestling Zero podcast. Again, not a bad show for WarGames. I guess it's a very good show to watch. You know, for wrestling, in terms of the wrestling quality, good. Yeah, give it a B, a solid B. But I'll tell you, if they would take some of my suggestions, man, I'm telling you, it would help out. Embrace the competition. It's here. If it's not AEW, the other shows are starting to make their way finally into becoming somewhat relevant again. Maybe they're not at the level. Of course not. They're not getting the audience, but there's a lot of good shows with some good rosters out there. You're not going to be able to take them. You're not going to be able to keep them all down. This is the sacrifice that you made, because you continue to just go ahead and run dry the legacy of the last 20 years. At least the main roster is getting in the right direction. All right, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for listening in. Subscribing as you do. Check everything out. We'll talk to you next week. Coming up Wednesday, going into Thursday. Come back for another Wrestling Zero podcast, because wrestling needs us. Subscribe to the Wrestling Zero podcast through all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio. You can also look for episodes on his YouTube channel, youtube.com/JBRASCO951. You can find all this information and more by going to the website, WrestlingIsReal.com.